Could Myles Garrett's own teammates talk him out of his trade request? They're going to try. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Dog Pound? I'm Spencer German, your host of the Locked On Browns podcast, proudly covering your Cleveland Browns each and every single day in the land and on the road. And it is a Fan Friday, doing things a little bit differently this week, though I'll explain. But first, David Njoku did make a public plea to Myles Garrett to take back his trade request. Will it work? And is he right about one key point that he brings up? It appears that Garrett's media tour has also changed the opinion of fans in regards to Myles Garrett's trade request and why Myles does deserve some blame for the Deshaun Watson trade. I do want to thank you for being in every day with the Locked On Browns podcast, making us your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. So David Njoku, as on the heels of Myles Garrett making the rounds on Radio Row on Wednesday. On Thursday, David Njoku made an appearance on Radio Row. He was on Bleacher Report and joined Mike Golick Jr. And he basically made a public plea to Myles Garrett not to request his trade, take it back. And he said, come home. And I think it's interesting because one thing he brings up is that he thinks that they're close. He thinks that they get the quarterback situation figured out. They can get this thing back on track. And frankly, I don't think he's that wrong in the sense of, like, we're only 15 months removed from this same team with a lot of the same pieces and parts making the playoffs. I get it. Maybe they weren't a championship caliber team with Joe Flacco, or the AARP version of Joe Flacco, I should say. And so, yeah, like, there's something to be said for you probably still need to upgrade that position. And Myles is looking around saying, like, I don't want to just make the playoffs. I want to win in the playoffs. And I get that. But it's like the first step is getting in. And I do think on some level, like Njoku's right, you get that situation figured out or stabilized in some capacity this offseason, you give yourself a shot. And Myles is obviously a big part of giving yourself a shot and having any sort of chance in the postseason. And so I can appreciate the fact that he's trying to convince him to stay and take back his trade request. I do want to get into, how close the Browns really are with the quarterback position. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But I do want to at least read you some of these quotes from David Njoku first if you haven't seen them. But he started the conversation by saying, like, come on, dog, stay home, bro. He knows who I'm talking to. Stay home. Come on. Give it another shot. We ain't that far off, honestly speaking. He talked about how that's his brother. He said, quote, we came in at the same time, same round, everything. So we've been there the same amount of time. We've seen the lowest of lows, the highest of highs in our team. I don't think we're done yet. I know he wants to win. He wants to be great. He wants to win championships. So do I. We didn't come this far just to come this far. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. And then he ended with, again, the key point here, as he talks about not being that far off. He said, I think we're close, man. We just need a healthy and good quarterback. And that is a comment that's been made by Denzel Ward, said it when he was approached by TMZ. Myles Garrett clearly emphasizing the quarterback position as he made his rounds on Radio Row, talking about wanting to play with different quarterbacks and how that position matters so much. And I talked yesterday about, his comments on the Mina Kimes show where he said, like, yeah, you can win with a game manager, but does that really get you where you want to go in a good defense? No, I have higher aspirations. I want more. And so, like, there's something to be said for all of that. And I listen, he's right. Like, is it an ideal scenario to bring in some bridge quarterback and try to go win that way? And can you win the Super Bowl that way? You can, but it's obviously not that easy. And you saw, I think, in the playoffs this year, somebody like Sam Darnold, a reclamation project, only got you so far. At some point, he turned back into a pumpkin that he is. He turned back into the Sam Darnold that we all kind of knew he was. And so I get what Myles is saying in terms of, like, limitations. But again, I keep going back to the fact that this team is only 15 months removed from being in the playoffs and at least having a shot. And I get that you might still need to upgrade that quarterback position. And that's why, like, I find that interesting. I brought it up yesterday, and I think some people kind of missed the point on this. I wasn't trying to say, like, Browns are going to sign a veteran and draft a, like, I wasn't trying to say, like, state the obvious yesterday of, like, the Browns are probably going to do both things, draft a rookie in some round and sign a veteran. and set their quarterback room up that way. What I was trying to get at was Garrett on Mina Kimes show mentioning, on his own, the bridge quarterback, like the bridge quarterback thing, and saying like, yeah, you can win that way, but I don't know that, it's a lot harder and I want to have a great quarterback. Like that to me felt like a him revealing in a way that the Browns, when they had their conversation about their plans, basically said like, that's our plan as things stand right now. Now, I wonder if that changes at all over the next several months, because like, I understand where if that's their pitch to Myles, is like, we're going to go get Kirk Cousins, for example, or we're going to sign a veteran and that's going to be our starting quarterback and we're going to go back to Stefanski's offense where he'd be disinterested. But I think about if like maybe if they become convinced that they're going to draft a quarterback at 2, is it something that maybe convinces him to stick around or get back on board with the team's plan? Like if their first pitch to him was, we're going to sign a veteran and we'll draft a rookie in a later round, potentially. Like that's kind of, and maybe they didn't get that specific with it. I don't know. Maybe they just kind of pitched him on like, here's some options. We're going to go out. We're going to scour the market for a veteran quarterback and we're going to get this thing, righted. And they didn't even really talk about like their options in the draft because they're still evaluating these guys. I don't know. But if that was kind of the initial plan, and again, I understand like that's an obvious path forward that they're probably going to execute. And I'm not trying to just state the obvious here. But what I'm trying to get at is like, if their plan pivots to, now that we've evaluated these guys and we like the Cam Ward or we like a Shedeur Sanders as the quarterback of the future, is that something that maybe convinces Myles Garrett to stick around? And maybe it's neither. Like maybe he doesn't like these quarterbacks. I'm not saying Myles Garrett's stupid and he hasn't heard what's being said about these quarterbacks, but we all know like the NFL draft every year is a crapshoot of sorts. Like some of the best evaluations on guys turn out to be wrong. Some of the worst evaluations on guys turn out to be wrong as well. Sometimes you hit on guys, sometimes you don't. So as much as like I don't necessarily love this class or think that there's a great quarterback or going to be a great quarterback of this bunch, that doesn't mean Cam Ward we won't be talking about Cam Ward as one of the top 10 quarterbacks in the sport in a couple years, or same thing with Shedeur Sanders. And so I wonder if like rookie quarterbacks, especially that you're taking that early, they come with hope. They come with, promise. There's a ceiling there of like, there's this untapped potential essentially of maybe this guy can be something. Maybe this guy can be that franchise quarterback. And it's funny, like as Garrett was sitting there again on Mina Kimes show, raving about Jaden Daniels. And I'm not saying, again, there's a Jaden Daniels in this class. I'm not trying to compare. I'm not saying that this class is apples to apples to last year's class. I don't believe that. I don't know if the Browns believe that. I'm sure Myles Garrett maybe doesn't believe that either. But if they drafted a quarterback at 2 and they get that position figured out with a young guy, why can't that be a viable situation where you feel good about the direction of the team? Maybe they don't want to draft one. And again, I don't know the specifics of what they pitched Myles Garrett on. I'm just kind of connecting dots and saying maybe they just pitched him on a veteran and that wasn't enough to sort of make him feel the warm and fuzzies about the future of the franchise, which I get. But if they change their minds and they say, now that we've evaluated these guys, we feel really good about if we get one of these top guys, it's going to turn the franchise around. Again, even if he's not Jaden Daniels, even if it's just he's a solid quarterback, and in his first year, he kind of proves to you like he stabilized the position and there's potential for him to grow. Like, why is that situation any different than Jaden Daniels? Other than the fact that Jaden's obviously played at a level where he was worthy of winning Offensive Rookie of the Year the way he did on Thursday night. But it's similar, right? Like it's like a year ago, I don't know that Myles Garrett was like looking around like, oh man, I want to go to the team that Jaden Daniels is on. How do we know that in a year from now we won't be saying, oh, well, Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward was better than we thought. And now the Browns are in an advantageous situation because they actually have the quarterback spot figured out. That's all I'm saying. I don't know, and I don't believe that this class is going to be phenomenal. Obviously, last year's class was a different monster, a different beast. There were so many good players in the quarterback class last year, and that kind of bared itself out during the season. So maybe that it doesn't happen. But I just, I can't help but wonder if there's, again, not knowing the full picture of what they presented Myles with, and just kind of reading between the lines here a little bit. What if they come back to the table and they say, you know what, we believe now that one of these guys could be our franchise guy. Would that change anything for Myles Garrett on top of his teammates trying to sell him on returning? Because David Njoku did his damnedest to try to pitch him on taking the trade request back and coming back. I don't know if that makes a difference or not. Myles seems pretty stuck in his mindset at this point. But, these relationships do matter. And, we'll see what happens with that. But it was just kind of an idea that I had. And this conversation obviously will continue in the weeks ahead. I do want to get into for our Fan Friday. I asked you to send me or let me know your thoughts on what side you're on the Myles Garrett versus the Browns sort of standoff here that's going on. Because I think early in the week, there was a lot more people on Myles' side. But I think that changed when he mentioned one person in particular during his Radio Row tour that he went on. I'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Today's show is sponsored by Betterhelp. We often hear about red flags we should avoid, but what if we focus more on identifying the positive signs in our relationships, those green flags? If you're not sure what they look like, therapy can help you identify them, actively practice them, and even embody that green flag energy yourself. Whether you're dating, married, building a friendship, or just working on yourself, therapy can help you form relationships that love you back. Therapy helps you develop healthy boundaries and improves your communication skills. It empowers you to set clear expectations and express your needs in relationships. BetterHelp makes it easy by offering online therapy with over 30,000 licensed therapists to choose from. And if you need to switch therapists, you can do so at no extra cost. Discover your relationship green flags with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. All right, so I think it's interesting. When the week started and Myles Garrett made his public trade request or made his trade request public because it was behind closed doors, it was already known by the Browns, as we have now found out. But once he made his trade request public, it felt like to me, and maybe I was wrong, it felt like to me there was a lot of Browns fans on like understanding where Myles was coming from. And I don't want to say taking his side, but being like, yeah, he probably deserves a chance to go compete for championships somewhere. I can respect and understand where he's coming from. There weren't a lot of people mad at Myles and they kind of felt like it was within his right to go do this and ask out, and that the Browns in a way did him wrong by botching the Deshaun Watson situation. And I do want to get into the Deshaun Watson situation coming up, because as much as the blame mostly falls on the Haslams, Andrew Berry, maybe someone on Kevin Stefanski, Myles Garrett isn't blameless in it either. So we'll get to that coming up. But I think that the people who might have been on Myles' side, I think those opinions shifted when he mentioned LeBron James on Wednesday during the Rich Eisen show. Once he talked about how he had talked to LeBron and kind of consulted with him, and they had, talked through how he went about leaving Cleveland. And it's obvious he's not trying to do it the way that LeBron did it the first time, going to blaze of glory, doing the decision, televised event, all that, breaking Cleveland's heart. That would have just ended badly for him, which is why, like I said yesterday, he's got more to lose than anybody than the Browns do, because the Browns are going to be here. But he's got more to lose, because if he makes this thing ugly, then that's just going to reflect badly on him and how he's remembered as a Brown and by this fan base. So he's got to sort of be careful with the way he approaches this thing, which is why I think you see him doing the media tour, going show to show, talking about it. And you see him mention that he talked to LeBron. I think that instantly turns people off. And it's not even, listen, LeBron deserves plenty of praise for bringing a championship to Cleveland. He broke the drought. He broke the curse. He is a phenomenal advocate for this region and this area, being from here. He is obviously arguably the greatest player in the history of the franchise, or the history of the NBA. And so he will always have a special place, I think, in the heart of Cleveland fans. But there is a contingent of Cleveland fans that, still feel some type of way about the fact that he left not once, but twice. And I can understand that. I can understand where him reaching out to the guy who left Cleveland 2 times for advice maybe doesn't sit well with people. Like as soon as you get to that point, you mentioned, I think people's eyes roll into the back of their heads. So I kind of wanted to get to some of your guys' comments because I did make it a Fan Friday centered around this topic in particular. Like, how has your thoughts on the situation shifted, or where do you stand on what side you're on based off of Myles' actions this week and just the request in general? And the first one I want to start with was this was a comment on yesterday's show on YouTube. Jermaine Foster says, "We are Cleveland Browns fans, not Garrett fans. I support Garrett while he's on the team. We should trade him to whom and when it is convenient for the Browns." I think that kind of sums up largely where a lot of fans are at this point with the situation and with Myles Garrett. It's this idea that, while he's here, yeah, he's ours. We respect him. We appreciate him. We might still respect him somewhere else, but if he wants out, like, fine. We want people who want to be here. And it's this idea that the Browns will long outlive all of us, long outlive Myles Garrett's career in the NFL. Like, the Browns will still be here. Myles Garrett will, like, the players are always just kind of like the fuel to the fire, if you will. Like, the NFL's a meat grinder. You put the players in, they put their bodies in the line for as long as their careers are, and then it spits out, it spits them out. They end up retiring, and the team is the meat grinder that just stays there, constant, churning out the season after season after season and player after player after player. And so, like I think like that sort of sums up the idea there that Browns fans are Browns fans first. And while they might understand where Garrett's coming from, if he doesn't want to be here, I think this could turn quickly to I'm good on Garrett not being here if he doesn't want to be here. We'll see what the team looks like moving forward, which is, I think, something that the organization uses to their advantage because they know, like, Cleveland's got an NFL team. They lost their team at some point. Like, they know they can sort of do whatever. I don't want to say whatever they want, but listen, they did the Deshaun Watson deal, so kind of whatever they want. And fans are still going to buy in because it's their NFL team. Another comment from yesterday's video: "This is a joke. They owe him nothing. He got paid very well for his services. When I heard LeBron talk to him, he's about himself. Do you honestly believe the Browns aren't trying to win? They had major injuries and, yes, some bad choices, but to say they aren't trying to win is a coward statement by Myles. It sounded like a LeBron statement. Only a few of teams are constantly winning, and truly only one team has a winning season, the champs. I hate Cleveland media because they all feed into this negativity." I get what he's saying there. But no, overall, like, again, this is somebody who literally brought up the fact that LeBron was mentioned. And I do think that turned people off. Here's another comment: "LeBron is the gift that keeps on giving. He will make Myles hated as much as he is." I don't know that LeBron is still hated as Cleveland 3357 on YouTube suggests, because I do think there's a lot of people who love LeBron because he brought a championship here, right? Again, rightfully so. But again, it's the fact that he mentioned LeBron and he consulted with LeBron, guy who's left Cleveland twice, that I do think turns some people off. So Myles might be a victim here, not a victim. He might be guilty here of saying too much, revealing too much. He should have just left it at the statement. He chose to make the media rounds, and that's probably, like, don't forget, he's in bed with the same agency that LeBron has, a lot of power in. Clutch. It's Clutch in LeBron's people. And so, like, this feels like them orchestrating this and saying, like, yeah, go talk about it. Get your face out there to explain why. And in a way, make it a little bit uglier because now the onus is on, like, the team to hear these comments. And I keep on wondering, like, what do you think Andrew Berry's thinking through all this? But yeah, like, the onus is on the team now to decide what they're going to do, but Garrett's kind of digging his feet in. And that's, I think, at least a step towards making it a little bit uglier, even if he's not, like, crapping on Cleveland on the way out. And I don't know if it gets to that point, because that would be a bad look for him. And how he's remembered is going to be how he handles this is how he's going to be remembered. So he does have to keep that in mind. But man, it's an unfortunate sort of situation here. And then a couple other comments on the short that I posted yesterday. Sago I don't even know how to say this. I'm just going to skip it. "It's perfect time to move on. If we get 2 first, I say let's go." David Tillery said he should be requesting a trade. So this is more so somebody on the side of Myles, I think. Like, chances are slim that the Browns will be better in the near future. than any team he might land on. I hope he ends up with Washington myself. And then another one, he's given us his best years, and we've given him one playoff win. So it seems like people are still sort of split on some level on this, but I think the LeBron part of this and the fact that his name came up this week has changed the math on people just resoundingly, because it did feel resounding earlier in the week that people were on Myles' side and they were blaming the Browns more so than Myles. And then the second he was going around Radio Row and talking about LeBron James, I think that shifted towards people maybe more so being frustrated with Myles than the Browns, who are the team that they cheer for and will be here long after Myles Garrett's career is over. So I just think that's an interesting sort of paradigm shift, and that's what I wanted to get into here on a Fan Friday. Your guys' reactions to this week that's unfolded and everything that we've seen sort of transpire. Final topic coming up, and it is again in relation to Myles Garrett. He has given us tons to talk about this week, and we know the Deshaun Watson situation has not gone as planned, and it's been a royal disaster, and it's part of the reason why the Browns don't have a quarterback right now, why Myles Garrett's requesting a trade. But I remind you, Myles Garrett is not blameless in the team making that move for Deshaun Watson. I'll explain. We'll talk about it coming up next on the Locked On Browns podcast. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with the FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting on all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill of the kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's just the icing on the cake. Download the app, head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bucks in $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to make it even more exciting than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports with over 10 million members and billions in winnings awarded. PrizePicks makes it fun and simple to get in on the action. Here's how it works. You pick more or less on at least two players' projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks even has a free pick for the big game where Patrick Mahomes just needs to throw for 1 yard for you to win. If you pair that with another correct pick, you'll be cashing out. Leading up to the game, I'm already looking at Travis Kelce more receiving yards after having a less impactful game against the Bills in the AFC Championship game. But don't forget to also take advantage of the promos tab where you can tail any of the Super Sweet Millie winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play that first $5 lineup. That's PrizePicks. Run your game. All right, so we know one of the biggest reasons the Browns are in this situation where Myles Garrett's requesting a trade. A lot of that centers around the fact that the Browns took a big swing on Deshaun Watson and failed. And they didn't get that situation right. It's been a royal disaster, and it's obviously caused a lot of strife within the organization, outside the organization, from this fan base. There's been a lot of apathy around this team. And I understand, as you dole out blame for why this move even came to be in the first place, there are a number of places you look. The Haslams were involved. We know they upped the ante by giving him the $230 million guarantee to push the deal to the finish line and get him to actually come here. We know Andrew Berry headed up a lot of the sort of scouting part of it and assessing how he would fit and, pursuing him back in 2022. We also know Kevin Stefanski did his best to try to make it work. And I don't know fully what his role looked like in the decision-making process, but I've questioned from the beginning whether or not it was going to be a fit anyway. And so I think Kevin Stefanski probably is partially to blame, but I don't know that his percentage is higher than Barry, who's the GM on record. This will be on his resume that he made this trade for years to come. and the Haslam's for being the ones who sort of, pushed it across the finish line with the $230 million guaranteed. And maybe Paul DePodesta too. But I don't know. You start doling out blame and you give out different percentages. Maybe it's like 40% for Barry, 40% for the like whatever percentages you're going to give out to different people in power for this organization, for this deal being made and this deal blowing up as badly as it has. Maybe they didn't vet him well enough, whatever. I also think it's important to keep in mind that Myles Garrett isn't blameless in the team making that decision in the first place. The same reason he's parading around Radio Row talking about why the quarterback position is the most important thing that he's looking for in his new team and why you need to have a good quarterback to win in this league and be successful in this league is the same reason that the Browns made that trade in the first place. If you think back to 2021, Myles Garrett, Baker Mayfield didn't really get along. We now know that about those two. There's been plenty of reporting done on the fact that those two didn't really see eye to eye. There was a little bit of a rift there. Baker also kind of did himself in by throwing Kevin Stefanski under the bus at the last game of the regular season after they lost to the Steelers about like the way they were running the offense. Like there was a lot of immaturity there. And I've been adamant that like the Baker Mayfield thing, I understand it's easy to look back and be like, why'd they ever trade him? There was a lot of things in play there. They did think he was too immature. They didn't think he was the right leader for that team. And I get all that, but some of it did revolve around too. Like they had to pick sides. They either had to decide, are we going to roll with Baker? Or are we going to roll with our franchise star player, Myles Garrett? And they chose Myles, which I think was probably the right choice. He was a generational talent. I get that. But the pressures of Myles wanting to win and understanding that you had this great player and his rift with the quarterback at that time is part of the reason why you went and made this move in the first place. You were trying to maximize it to the best of your ability. So I understand where he wants a great quarterback, and I understand he wants to play somewhere where there is a great quarterback. The Browns did try to give you that. Like I've never, and I continue to say it. I've never blamed the Browns for trying to upgrade that position. I get where the thought process was with Deshaun. You go back and watch those 2020 highlights. That's a top 5 quarterback. So I get why they were enamored with him. I get why they wanted to bring him in. They were trying to maximize where the organization was at with all these cornerstone players to go chase championships. I don't blame them for that. I blame them for how they maybe evaluated Deshaun, how they maybe didn't, figure enough how the mental side of it was going to be a factor, and how his 2 years away from football after the 11-game suspension were going to play a factor into how he was going to perform. All those things mattered. For thinking that was only going to be a 4-game suspension instead of an 11-game suspension, like they completely missed the mark on evaluating the situation that they were getting into and stepping into. And so that is on them. But Myles was part of the reason why, part of the motivation why you made that move in the first place. So I'm not saying like he's the one that pulled the trigger, but it's not like the Browns aren't here. The Browns are here because of their own errors, yes. But it was an error that was made with the pressures of understanding Myles Garrett didn't like the last quarterback. And, in some ways, like Myles contributed to Baker being traded. And so here we are. I'm not saying it's a massive percent. It's probably something in like the 3 to 5% range. But Myles isn't necessarily blameless in isn't blameless in the Browns being where they are right now, because the Browns pursued Deshaun Watson, understanding that the star player and the quarterback didn't get along, and knowing that if they wanted to sort of keep him happy, they had to make a change. And so I just don't think that should be lost on Myles either, that the organization has tried to do right by you over the years and give you what you wanted. They made the wrong choice and it failed. But again, I don't think he can be blameless in why the organization's where they are and for why the Deshaun Watson decision was made in the first place. That's key to remember. That's all I'm saying. That's going to do it for another episode of the Locked On Browns podcast with you, Dog Pound. Thank you for joining me, as always, to talk about your favorite football team. And we certainly have plenty more to talk about in the weeks ahead, including I had to kind of table this week because, man, like the Myles stuff just hijacked the entire week. But I've been watching some Jackson Dart tape, and it's time to decide if you are on the Jackson Dart hype train or not. So we'll get into that coming up next week. I hope you continue to make us your first listen every day. For your second listen, go check out the new Locked On NFL show, or if you want to keep it local, you can check out Locked On Cavs or Locked On Guardians. Thanks for being an everydayer at the Locked On Podcast Network. I will talk to you again real soon. Peace.